The U.S. State Department says it is waiting to see how both China and the Philippines will respond to the result. CCTV's Wang Guan attended Tuesday's briefing. He joins me now in the studio. You had a chance to ask some questions.
Right, Elaine. There are actually many questions that remain unanswered from the Chinese point of view. For example, this time around, the State Department says it encourages the rule of law, accepts the arbitration. But if you look back in the history, as my colleagues have mentioned, there are cases where the U.S. did not recognize the efficacy of the arbitration. For example, the Nicaragua case. So I asked about that. And also, when the U.S. was so eager to express concerns with China's land reclamation activities, many Chinese, on the internet, on the web sphere, point out that that can be a double standard. So for those questions, I had a little conversation, if you will, with Mr. Kirby of the State Department. Mr. Kirby, very quickly, you said they're consistently concerned about land reclamation activities by China. But some people in China point out that, in fact, China is hardly the first country to do so. Vietnam, the Philippines did that in the past, but in those cases, the U.S. was not so eager to project their anger or protest.
Look, I'm not going to, again, we're not taking individual positions on individual claims, but I think it's a far cry and a stretch to compare what China has done in just recent months, and certainly over the last year or so, with land reclamation and militarization, with any such potential like situations from other countries in the region. There's absolutely no way to compare the scope and the size and the character of it.
From your statement this afternoon, it seems that Washington can imply, if not dictate, what countries in the region in South China Sea should or should not do based on a piece of treaty UNCLOS, which of course the U.S. did not ratify. This administration,
and
along with others, tried to push for it, but you never get a two-third majority in the Senate.
We continue to urge the Senate to ratify. This administration has been very, very clear about that. But we still abide by the central tenets of it, even though we aren't a signer.
But when we abide by the central tenets, do you think the U.S. loses kind of the moral authority to do that when it does not ratify it?
This isn't about expressing moral authority. And I kind of reject the implication in the question. This isn't about the United States projecting moral authority. This is an international tribunal which came up with a legally binding decision that the United States didn't influence. We said before that they reached it, that it would be legally binding. So did the world. Now they've reached it. It's still legally binding, and the world is going to be watching what both claimants do in terms of meeting their obligations on this. As I said at the outset, the United States doesn't take a position on individual claims. We do take a position on coercion, and part of coercion is the potential militarization of land features.
Do you think the U.S. in any ways contributed to the rising of tensions, militarization in South China Sea when they sent bombers and cruisers, frigates in the region so often?
No, I don't, and here's why. The United States military has a presence in the Pacific. We are a Pacific power. 5 of our 7 treaty alliances are in the Pacific. We have enormous security commitments in the region. And when we operate our ships and our aircraft, we do so in international airspace and international maritime space. And we train with our allies and our partners. And those are serious obligations because our military has a responsibility to protect and defend the United States' national security interests.
And it looks like Mr. Kirby had a very different perspective, so we have to agree to disagree.
You know, it's interesting because the position of the U.S. government is that they do not take positions, they do not take sides when it comes to this dispute. What were your observations on this ruling? It probably was not a surprise for many, but just what were your thoughts on it?
Well, Elaine, I think the Philippines filed a very clever lawsuit against China in this case because it said this case the charges that they brought against China was not about sovereignty, but if you look carefully, it has everything to do with sovereignty. It is like it does not ask a judge to rule on the ownership of this building, but if you delegitimize the zip code of 20001 and says within this zip code you cannot build commercial or residential buildings, you delegitimize the ownership of this building. That is what happened with this ruling. Look at the charges. Number 1, the 9-dash line. The Permanent Court of Arbitration delegitimized this line, which means that the ownership of the islands and the rocks of China were questioned. So that is about sovereignty. And secondly, the land features, right? Whether or not they're rocks or islands or low tide elevations, if they're the latter two, they cannot confer economic EEZ and also the sovereignty. So it is about sovereignty. And thirdly, it's about those economic rights, such as the land reclamation activities in Scarborough Shoal. And then the court ruled against China so that the Philippines can move their fishing boats in there. So it has a lot to do with the territorial claims. It's a very cleverly filed lawsuit, but again, Beijing has made its position very clear that it does not think the court has the jurisdiction over sovereignty. So in text, the lawsuit was not about sovereignty, but in spirit, many think that it is about sovereignty.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if anything actually even happens with this new change in leadership in the Philippines. Wang Guan, thank you so much for all of that.